Don't let her. That cry stopped every engine on the road. The sun was sinking low over a small American town, the kind with one main street, an old white church, and folks dressed in their Sunday best. The bells were ringing for a wedding. It was supposed to be a happy day. But then came the sound no one expected. A little boy, about 9 years old, thin with a tear-streaked face, ran into the road, waving his arms. His shirt was wrinkled, his shoes untied. Behind him, the church doors were open and laughter spilled out. He shouted, his voice breaking, "Please don't let her marry him." Every biker hit the brakes. Engines rumbled to silence. Dust hung in the air. 70 men in black leather and steel boots turned toward the boy who'd just stepped between them and the road. For a second, no one said a word. Then Stitch, the oldest of the group, pulled off his helmet. His beard was gray, his eyes sharp. He'd seen a lot in his life, but never a kid standing in front of roaring motorcycles, crying for help. "Kid," Stitch said gently. "What did you just say?" The boy clutched a photo to his chest. His hands shook so badly the paper bent. "She's my mom," he whispered. "She's marrying a man who hurts her." The men froze. A single heartbeat passed, then another. The kid's words hit harder than any punch. "She said it was an accident," he went on, voice trembling. "But it wasn't. He gets angry. He hit her, and nobody believes me." He wiped his face with the back of his hand. "Everybody thinks he's some big shot, a rich man who helps people, but he's not. He's mean when nobody's looking." A biker named Rook muttered under his breath. "A rich man, huh?" The boy nodded. "He's rich. Everyone says she's lucky, but she's not. Please don't let her marry him." The man exchanged looks. This wasn't the kind of thing you walk away from. Stitch crouched so he could look the boy in the eye. "What's your name, son?" "Leo." "Okay, Leo." Stitch's voice softened. "You did the right thing coming here. You're brave." Leo swallowed hard. "You'll stop it. You'll make her see." Stitch didn't answer right away. He glanced at his brothers. Men who'd made their share of mistakes. Men who'd been judged for what they looked like instead of who they were. They knew what it was like to be the outcast, to be the one no one listened to. Finally, Stitch stood slow and sure. "We'll make sure she's safe." That was all Leo needed to hear. He let out a shaky breath, almost a sob. For once, someone believed him. The engines roared back to life. Leo climbed onto Stitch's Harley, holding tight to the photo. His small fingers gripped the leather seat as the convoy rolled down the street toward the white church on the hill. The sound of the bikes carried across town, deep, steady, like thunder. People peeked out from windows. Some shook their heads. Others whispered. Inside the church, the bride stood in front of a mirror, veil trembling, hands shaking. She smiled, but her eyes looked tired, like a woman trying to believe a story she already knew was a lie. Outside, the man she was about to marry stood tall and proud in his gray suit. His smile was polished, practiced. He waved to guests and shook hands, the picture of confidence. No one there saw the shadow behind the charm. No one saw the anger he hid so well. The same man who'd once shouted at a poor waitress for spilling coffee. The same man who'd laughed when she cried, tossing a few dollars on the table like she was nothing. People had watched, embarrassed, and done nothing. He was too rich, too powerful to be challenged. But this time, he'd picked the wrong people to fool. Because the roar of those motorcycles wasn't just noise. It was justice on 2 wheels rolling right toward him. As the Harleys pulled up outside the church, heads turned. Conversation stopped. The groom's smile faded. Leo jumped down from the sidecar, clutching his photo. His small shoes hit the ground hard. His face was red from wind and tears, but his eyes were steady. He took one step forward and shouted, his voice echoing down the street. "Please don't let her marry him!" The guests gasped. The priest froze, and the man in the gray suit went pale. Inside, the bride turned toward the door. Her bouquet trembled in her hands as she saw her son standing there beside a line of bikers, the wind catching their jackets, the sun glinting off the chrome. The leader took off his helmet again, stepped forward, and said calmly, "Ma'am, your boy's got something to tell you." You could feel the shift in the air, that strange, heavy stillness that comes right before truth breaks through. The guests leaned forward, whispering. Some laughed nervously, thinking it was a stunt, a joke, but the bride knew better. One look at her son's face, and she knew that wasn't the face of a child acting out. That was the face of a child begging for someone to listen before it was too late. Leo took another step forward. "He's not who you think he is," he said softly. "Please, Mom, don't." The man in the suit clenched his jaw, pretending to smile, but his hands balled into fists. His mask was slipping. Outside, the sun dipped behind the steeple, throwing long shadows across the road. The engines idled like a heartbeat. The bikers didn't say a word. They didn't have to. They stood there, 70 men who had seen too many lies, too much pain, giving a small boy the courage to speak the truth in front of the whole town. And in that moment, it didn't matter who was rich or poor, clean or covered in grease. It only mattered who had the guts to do what was right. The air was heavy after that. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Even the church bells seemed to pause, as if the whole town was waiting to see what these bikers would do next. Leo stood there, small but steady, the picture of his mother and that smiling man clutched in his hands. The edges were torn, the paper bent, but his grip didn't loosen. That photo was proof. The only thing that made sense in a world where adults didn't listen. Stitch watched the boy in silence. He'd been through a lot in his life. Bar fights, betrayals, time behind bars. But there was something about that kid that made his chest tighten. Maybe it was the courage. Maybe it was the fear. Maybe it was how alone he looked. "Come on, kid," Stitch said quietly, laying a hand on his shoulder. "Let's talk somewhere else." They walked toward the bikes, the others following behind like a shadow. The church guests peeked from the windows, whispering. The groom's jaw clenched, but he didn't move. A few minutes later, at the gas station across the street, the engines went silent again. The men stood in a loose circle around Leo. He looked so small among them, just a boy holding a photo and a plastic toy ring, his bottom lip trembling. Stitch knelt so he could see his face. "All right, son. Start from the beginning. What makes you so sure this man's dangerous?" Leo's throat bobbed as he swallowed hard. "Because I saw it. I heard it." His voice cracked. "He yells at her when nobody's there. He breaks things last week. He pushed her. She said she fell, but I know she didn't. She had a bruise here." He touched his arm gently, and she told me not to talk about it. The men looked at each other, jaws tight, eyes darkening. "Where's your mom now?" Stitch asked. "In the back of the church. She doesn't know I left. I tried to tell my uncle, but he said I was just scared. Everyone says he's a good man, he has money, he bought her a house, and people think that means he's nice. But when he's mad..." Leo's voice broke again. He's not nice. Rook, the biggest of the group, kicked at the dirt. I hate that. Money's got folks so blinded they can't tell good from evil. Deacon, the quiet one with silver hair, took a long breath. Heard that story too many times. Leo rubbed his eyes with his sleeve. He told her I was lying, that I make things up to get attention. She believed him. That last sentence hit like a hammer. You could almost feel it ripple through the men. That awful sting of being dismissed when you're telling the truth. Stitch nodded slowly. Sometimes people don't want to see what's right in front of them, Leo. But that doesn't mean you're wrong. The boy looked up at him desperate. You'll stop her, right? Before it's too late. Stitch stared past him toward the church steeple shining in the sun. If nobody else will, we will. Those words weren't said loud. They didn't need to be. The group fell quiet again, each man lost in his own thoughts. Rook leaned close to Stitch. You sure about this? We step into a wedding, we make enemies. Stitch's eyes stayed on the horizon. You want to walk away knowing we could have stopped something bad? Rook didn't answer. None of them did. The truth was, every man there knew what it felt like to lose someone because nobody stepped up. Gadget, the youngest, broke the silence. We can't just barge in, we'll scare everyone. Maybe we stay outside, watch first. If it looks wrong, we move. Deacon nodded. We can keep it peaceful. But if he touches her or that kid, I'm not standing still. Stitch rubbed his beard, thinking, all right, half of us outside, half inside. No noise, no chaos. We just make sure that woman gets a chance to see the truth before she says yes. Then a voice came from behind them. It was Cypher checking his phone. Boss, we got a problem. The groom's brother's a cop. And guess what? He's already called in a complaint. Says there's a bunch of bikers harassing the wedding. Stitch's eyes narrowed. How the hell does he know already? Probably someone from the church texted him. Cypher said, They're calling us troublemakers. Rook cursed under his breath. They'll paint us as the bad guys before we even roll in. Stitch looked at Leo again. The boy was staring at the ground, silent, scared he'd made things worse. Stitch crouched down again and tipped the boy's chin up with one finger. Hey, he said, voice low. Don't you worry about that. We've been called worse than troublemakers. What matters is what's right. Leo nodded, but his eyes shimmered. He'll be mad when he sees you. He doesn't like people who tell him no. Stitch's tone darkened. Then he's about to have a long day. The group chuckled under their breath. Not cruelly, just that dry laugh men give before stepping into something heavy. Gadget folded up a map on the hood of his bike. Okay, the church has 2 exits. We'll park a few bikes on each side. Nobody gets in or out without us seeing. Deacon adjusted his jacket. If the cops show up, we're calm. We talk first. No fists, no chaos, just truth. Rook looked at Stitch. You really think we can pull this off without getting thrown in jail? Stitch's mouth curved into a half smile. I've done harder things with worse company. They all laughed softly, but it was a nervous kind of laughter. The kind that hides fear under loyalty. Then Leo spoke again, so quiet they almost missed it. What if she doesn't believe me again? Stitch turned back to him. Then we'll stand there till she does. That simple promise hung in the air like thunder before a storm. The group began checking their bikes, tightening gloves, strapping on helmets. The sound of engines starting again filled the quiet street one by one until the whole town could hear it. Across the road, the white chapel shimmered in the afternoon light. The guests inside were laughing, completely unaware of what was about to arrive. Leo climbed back into the sidecar. His small fingers gripped the seat, but his face had changed. He didn't look like a scared kid anymore. He looked ready. As the first bike rolled forward, Stitch's voice cut through the rumble. "Boys," he said, calm but strong. "Let's go make sure nobody gets hurt today." And with that, the convoy moved. Engines roared like thunder, tires kicking up dust as they turned toward the chapel. People came out of nearby shops, staring in disbelief. 70 motorcycles rolling through Main Street, sunlight flashing on chrome and leather. Behind them, the flag above the clubhouse fluttered in the wind, and for a split second, the town looked like a movie. The kind where the heroes don't wear badges, just scars and purpose. Leo looked up at Stitch as they neared the church. "You think she'll see me this time?" Stitch gave a small nod. "Oh, she'll see you, and she'll see who he really is." The boy held the photo tighter, the paper trembling in his hand. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about pride. It was about a mother who'd forgotten what love was supposed to look like, and a son who remembered. And now 70 bikers were about to remind the whole town, too. The engines thundered down Main Street like a heartbeat that couldn't be ignored. People came out of diners, hardware stores, and front porches just to stare. They didn't know what was happening, only that something big was unfolding right in front of them. Dust rose behind the convoy. The sunlight hit the polished chrome and made it flash like fire. And in the middle of it all sat a 9-year-old boy named Leo, holding on tight to a photograph that meant everything. His mother's wedding was minutes away. Stitch rode in front, his face carved in focus. He'd led his brothers through storms, through fights, through funerals. But this was different. This wasn't about pride or payback. It was about a scared kid and a truth no one wanted to see. When they reached the small white chapel, the street was lined with cars, shiny ones, the kind you only see at fancy events. Guests laughed, posed for pictures, fixed their ties. They looked expensive, untouched by trouble. The Harleys slowed one by one until they came to a stop just outside the church fence. The rumble faded into a deep growl that seemed to shake the windows. Every head turned. The laughter died instantly. Stitch killed his engine and set his boots on the pavement. For a long moment, no one spoke. The smell of gasoline and dust filled the air, cutting through the perfume and roses drifting from the open doors of the chapel. Inside, the organ played softly. Leo's small hand touched Stitch's arm. "That's him," he whispered. Stitch followed his gaze. The groom stood at the top of the steps, perfect gray suit, gold watch, slick smile. He looked like a man who'd never been told no. And even from a distance, Stitch could feel the chill coming off him, the kind of chill that hides behind charm. The man's face twitched when he saw the boy, just for a second, but it was enough. His smile faltered. Stitch's jaw tightened. "Stay here," he said. "Here." He walked forward slow and steady. The crowd parted like water. A few guests whispered. Someone pulled out a phone. The groom's voice came sharp, polished, full of irritation. "What's the meaning of this?" Stitch stopped at the bottom of the steps. "We're not here to ruin your big day, sir," he said calmly. "We just came to make sure it's not built on a lie." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The man's eyes darkened. "Who do you think you are?" Before Stitch could answer, Leo stepped forward from behind him, clutching the picture. His voice cracked as he said, "I'm her son." The church went silent. Every guest froze. Every whisper died. The bride turned, her veil fluttering as she tried to see through the doorway. The groom's jaw worked, his smile back in place, but stiff. "Leo, go home. You're embarrassing your mother." But Leo shook his head. "You hurt her. I saw you." The words hung in the air like a lightning bolt. The groom's face hardened. "Enough." He started down the steps, but Stitch lifted a hand, calm and steady. "Best not touch the boy," he said. That was when the groom saw them all. 70 bikers standing quietly behind Stitch. Not one of them moved. Not one of them spoke. But the message was clear. The groom sneered. "This is ridiculous. I don't know what kind of circus you people think you're running, but this is private property." Stitch's voice was low, even. "A wedding's public until vows are said. We're just here to make sure the lady's got all the facts before she gives her word." The guests exchanged uneasy looks. The air felt heavy, like a storm about to break. Inside the chapel, the bride stood frozen near the altar. The organist stopped playing. Her bouquet trembled in her hands. Through the open door, she saw her son standing there, small, shaking, but unafraid. And in that second, the memories she'd been trying to bury started crawling back. The shouting, the slammed doors, the bruises she'd covered with makeup. She'd told herself it was love, that it was stress, mistakes, bad timing, anything but what it really was. But now, seeing Leo's tear-streaked face and the row of bikers behind him, she knew she couldn't lie to herself anymore. The groom turned to her, his voice suddenly soft and sweet. "Honey, don't listen to him. He's confused. You know how kids get." But the softness in his tone didn't reach his eyes. It never did. And for the first time, she saw it. The darkness she'd been excusing for months. Her fingers loosened. The bouquet slipped from her hands and fell to the floor. Leo saw it happen and took a step forward. "Mom," her voice trembled. "Leo, what are you doing here?" "I had to," he said. "He's lying to you." The groom snapped. "Enough, boy." Then, before anyone could move, he reached out quick, harsh, and grabbed Leo's arm. The sound of the crowd gasping filled the churchyard. It wasn't a hard grab, but it was enough. Enough for everyone to see the mask crack. Enough for the truth to come out in one silent second. Stitch's voice came like gravel. "Let him go." The groom froze. His hand shook slightly as he released Leo. He tried to laugh, but the sound died halfway. Stitch stepped closer, voice calm, but edged with steel. "You don't put your hands on a kid. Not today. Not ever." Leo's mother rushed down the aisle, gathering her son in her arms. Tears filled her eyes as she turned toward the man she was about to marry. "You said you'd changed." He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Someone from the crowd whispered, "He grabbed that boy like it was nothing." Another voice followed. "Did you see her arm? Look at those bruises." It spread fast, a wave of murmurs, anger, disbelief. Stitch didn't need to say another word. The truth was doing all the talking now. He stepped back, letting the silence do its work. Around him, the bikers stood like sentinels, still unblinking, letting justice breathe on its own. Leo held on to his mother's waist, his face pressed into her dress. "I told you, Mom," he said, voice breaking. "I told you." And for the first time, she whispered back, "I know, baby. I know." The groom's face flushed red. "You think you can ruin my life with some street trash and a kid's story?" He laughed bitterly. You don't know who you're dealing with. Stitch looked at him calm as stone. We know enough. The man turned, scanning the crowd like he expected someone to defend him, but no one did. Even the priest stood frozen, eyes wide, unsure what to say. And in that silence, something shifted. For years, that man had walked through this town with his money, his charm, his arrogance, untouchable. But right there, in front of the church he thought he owned, his whole image cracked apart like glass. All because one small boy refused to stay quiet. Stitch turned to Leo, resting a heavy hand on his shoulder. You did good, kid. Real good. Leo blinked up at him. Is it over? Stitch glanced toward the groom, who stood alone now. No crowd, no smile, no mask. Not yet, he said softly. But the truths finally got a voice. And for the first time all day, everyone could hear it, loud and clear. But when the truth finally lands, it doesn't just free people. It shakes everything around them. The crowd outside the small white church didn't know what to do. Some stood frozen, hands over their mouths. Others whispered to each other. Not out of gossip, but disbelief. The man they'd all called a good neighbor, a generous businessman, now looked like a stranger no one wanted to be near. The bride, Leo's mother, stood in the middle of it all, her arms still wrapped around her son. Her makeup had run down her cheeks, her veil hung half-torn, and her lips trembled as she tried to make sense of what had just happened. Stitch stepped back, giving her space. He wasn't there to humiliate her. He was there to make sure she saw what the world had been blind to. The other bikers stood quiet behind him. No shouting, no threats, just presence. Then Rook muttered, "What now, boss?" Stitch's eyes stayed on the groom. Now we see what kind of man he really is. The groom, still breathing hard, straightened his jacket and tried to laugh. You people have no idea who I am. I'll ruin every one of you for this. You'll regret ever stepping foot here. He pointed a finger at Stitch, but his hand trembled. His voice didn't carry the power it once had, just desperation. Stitch tilted his head, calm as ever. You can't ruin men who've already survived their worst days. That line cut through the air. A few guests actually nodded almost unconsciously. The groom's brother, the police officer, finally arrived, his car pulling up with the siren briefly wailing before he turned it off. He stepped out, confused and cautious, hand resting near his holster. What's going on here? The groom moved fast. Arrest them. They barged in, disrupted a private ceremony. Hold on, the officer interrupted, scanning the scene. His eyes landed on Leo, on his mother, on the bruise peeking beneath the lace sleeve of her dress. Is that true, ma'am? He asked softly. Her voice was barely a whisper. He hurt me? The crowd gasped again. The officer's jaw clenched. He looked between his brother and the woman. You told me it was an accident. The groom's temper flared. It was, she slipped. Then why is the kid shaking like that? The officer cut in. For a long, painful moment, no one spoke. Then the officer sighed, stepped forward, and took his brother by the arm. You're coming with me. We're going to have a talk downtown. Are you kidding me? The groom shouted, struggling. You're going to take her word over mine, over your own brother's? But the officer didn't answer. He just led him toward the car. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder now, not of judgment, but of realization. The kind that comes when people see clearly for the first time. Stitch turned away, letting the cops do their job. He didn't need to see more. He'd seen enough pain in that woman's eyes to last a lifetime. But just as he was about to walk back to his bike, the bride called out, "Wait!" Stitch turned. She stepped toward him, holding Leo close. "You didn't even know us. Why would you do this?" He shrugged lightly. "Kid asked for help. That's all it took." Her eyes welled again. No one ever believed him. Not even me. Stitch's voice softened. "You do now. That's what matters." She nodded, pulling Leo closer, whispering something only he could hear. The officer guided the groom into the car. Reporters had already begun to appear. Cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward. Someone yelled, "Did the Hells Angels just stop a wedding?" Stitch didn't answer. He didn't care about headlines. The bikers started their engines again, one by one, the sound rolling through the air like thunder breaking over the town. But before Stitch could mount his Harley, Rook spoke again. "You sure we're done here?" Stitch looked back toward the church. The priest was helping the bride steady herself. Leo stood beside her, still holding the wrinkled photograph, now torn in half. One piece with his mother's smile, the other with the man's face. Stitch gave a slow nod. "Yeah, we're done." But as they began to ride off, Stitch's thoughts drifted back to the gas station earlier, when Leo had told his story. Back to the moment the boy said, "Nobody believes me." That sentence had hit Stitch harder than he expected because once upon a time he'd been that kid too, begging someone, anyone, to believe him. He could still remember his own mother's voice, bruised and tired, telling him everything was fine. He remembered the nights when it wasn't. Rook must have seen something in his face. "You okay, brother?" Stitch gave a small nod. "Yeah, just thinking." They rode in silence for a while, the town slowly shrinking behind them. Then Gadget broke the quiet. "Man, that groom's face when the truth came out. I almost felt sorry for him." Stitch shot him a look. "Don't. A man who raises a hand to a woman doesn't deserve pity." Deacon, riding beside them, added softly, "Guess we all got reasons we can't stand seeing that kind of thing." "Yeah," Stitch murmured, "we do." By the time they reached the edge of town, the sun had dipped low. The wind was cooler now, the road open and quiet. They pulled over at an old diner, the kind with flickering neon lights and a single waitress who knew everyone's order by heart. Inside, the men sat down with steaming mugs of coffee. The radio hummed quietly in the background. No one spoke for a while. Finally, Rook leaned forward. "You think we did the right thing?" Stitch stared into his cup. "If that boy sleeps easier tonight, then yeah, we did the right thing." The others nodded. The weight in the room started to lift, but then the door opened. The small bell above it jingled, and Leo walked in, holding his mother's hand. She'd changed out of the wedding dress and into jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back. She looked tired, but free. Leo spotted the bikers and ran over, wrapping his arms around Stitch's waist. "You stayed?" he said. Stitch smiled faintly. "Didn't plan to, but coffee's good here." The mother approached slowly. "They told me he's gone. They're keeping him overnight." Stitch nodded. "That's good news. I don't know how to thank you," she said quietly. "You saved me. You saved him." Stitch shook his head. "No, ma'am. He saved you. We just made sure everyone could hear him." She smiled through tears, brushing Leo's hair back. "He always said angels would come for us. I didn't think they'd ride Harleys. That made even the toughest men in the diner laugh. A low, warm sound that carried farther than thunder. Leo's mom bought their meal even when they refused. Before leaving, she turned and said softly, "If you ever need anything?" Stitch nodded once, tipping his cup. "We'll hold you to that." As she and Leo walked out into the night, the bikers sat quietly again, each lost in thought. Deacon finally said what everyone was thinking. "Funny, isn't it, how sometimes strangers see what family won't?" Stitch looked toward the window, where Leo and his mother were walking under the streetlight, hand in hand. "Yeah," he said, "and how sometimes that's enough to change everything." But that night wasn't the end. It was just the start of what people in town would later call the day everything turned quiet. The next morning, Main Street looked normal again. The same bakery opened at 7 o'clock. The same people walked their dogs, picked up their mail, and pretended yesterday was just a dream. But everyone who'd been at that wedding carried something they couldn't quite shake. The truth has a way of echoing long after the noise fades. Stitch and his crew were back at the old gas station, the one with the tin roof that creaked in the wind. The bikes were lined up out front, sunlight glinting off the metal. Nobody was laughing or telling stories that morning. Not yet. Rook leaned against his Harley, holding a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. "You think the news will twist it?" he asked quietly. "They always do," Deacon said, lighting a cigarette. "They'll make us out like the villains or the heroes. Either way, they'll miss the point." Stitch sat on the step near the door, hands clasped loosely. "Doesn't matter what they say. The kid's safe. His mom's safe. That's enough." A breeze rolled through, lifting the smell of oil and old asphalt. Then Gadget walked up with his phone. "You seen this?" He turned the screen toward them. A shaky video was spreading online. Someone from the crowd had recorded everything. The bikes, the shout, the groom grabbing Leo, the silence that followed. The caption read, "Hell's Angels stopped a wedding and saved a life." Thousands of views, hundreds of comments. Some were cheering, others were judging, but everyone was watching. Rook chuckled softly. "Guess we went viral." Stitch smirked, shaking his head. "Ain't that something? We stop a beating and the world acts like it's a miracle." Deacon exhaled smoke through his nose. "That's because it is these days." They all went quiet again, not because they regretted what they'd done, but because something about it hit deep. Stitch looked toward the highway, eyes narrowing against the sun. "You ever notice," he said, "how the world only remembers when bikers mess up? Never when they show up." The men nodded. They knew that feeling too well. Gadget kicked at a loose rock. "You think the kid will be okay? School's going to be rough. Small towns don't forget fast." But Stitch leaned back, his voice steady. "He'll be okay. He's got more courage in him than most grown men I've met. He just needed someone to remind him he wasn't crazy for telling the truth." The sound of an old truck broke the stillness. Everyone turned as a pickup rolled slowly into the lot. Leo's mom stepped out, the boy beside her. She carried a box in her arms. "Morning," she said softly. Stitch stood. "Morning, ma'am. I brought something," she said, setting the box on the table. Inside were pastries, sandwiches, and a small note on top. "Thank you." Leo gave a shy wave. "Mom said we should bring breakfast." Rook grinned. "Now that's the kind of viral I can get behind." They ate together in the shade, the sound of the highway stretching out in the distance. It wasn't much, just quiet, coffee, and the feeling that for once they'd done something that mattered. After they finished, Leo looked up at Stitch. "My mom says we're moving." Stitch nodded. "That's good. New start. She's going to work at the diner near the ocean," Leo continued. "Said maybe I can surf." "Surf, huh?" Rook chuckled. "Just don't crash like we do." Leo smiled, small but real. She said the ocean makes her feel free. I don't think she's felt that way in a long time. Stitch's voice softened. Tell her that's what she deserves. The boy nodded again, then pulled something from his pocket, the torn photograph now taped back together. I kept it, he said, because I want to remember what almost happened. Stitch studied the picture for a long moment. Sometimes remembering is the hardest part, kid, but it's how we stay honest. Leo tucked the photo away and whispered, I'm not scared of him anymore. That's because you faced him, Stitch said. Fear only wins when you run. The boy's mother watched the two of them quietly. She hadn't said much, but her eyes told the story. The kind of gratitude words can't carry. I don't know how to thank you, she said finally. What you did. No one else would have believed a kid like him. Stitch gave a half smile. We've all been the kid nobody believed, ma'am. Maybe that's why we listened. Her eyes filled again, but this time the tears were soft, healing ones. Leo tugged at Stitch's sleeve. Do you think there are more people like him out there? Like the man who hurt her? Stitch looked out toward the horizon. Yeah, there are. Too many. But there are also people like you. And when people like you speak up, the bad ones don't get to hide so easy anymore. The boy seemed to think about that for a long time, then smiled faintly. Maybe I'll get a bike someday. Stitch laughed. You get old enough. I'll teach you myself. Leo's mom laughed softly, too, shaking her head. Please don't give him ideas. The sound of that laughter, light, unforced, alive, was the kind of music the bikers hadn't heard in a long time. After they left, Stitch stayed sitting for a while, staring at the empty road. The wind tugged at the flagpole above the station, making the fabric snap and flutter. Rook sat beside him. You think we'll ever stop finding trouble? Stitch smiled faintly. We don't find it. It finds us. They both laughed quietly. Then Deacon came over, phone in hand again. You're not going to believe this, he said. Reporters are calling the church a scene of redemption. Even the local sheriff said we handled it better than half his deputies would have. Stitch raised an eyebrow. No kidding. Deacon nodded. They're calling it the day the angels rode for a boy. The men looked at each other, a mix of disbelief and pride. Stitch shook his head, a faint grin spreading. We didn't ride for a headline. We rode for the truth. But deep down, he knew it meant something. Not just to the town, but to all of them. For years, people had looked at them and only seen the patches, the scars, the noise, not the heart. Now, for once, they saw it all. That night, when the engines went quiet and the lights went out in the clubhouse, Stitch sat alone outside for a while. The moon hung low, painting silver on the parked Harleys. He thought about Leo's words. I'm not scared anymore. It wasn't just the boy he was thinking about now. It was himself. It was every person who'd ever been silenced. And for the first time in a long time, Stitch felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. He leaned back in his chair, closed his eyes, and let the quiet roll over him. Because sometimes the loudest thing you can do is show up. And in a town that had never seen 70 bikers roll in for justice, that silence afterward said more than any speech ever could. The next few days passed quietly. Too quietly. People kept glancing toward the old gas station where Stitch and his crew gathered. Some waved now, others just stared. A few crossed the street when they saw them coming, not out of fear anymore, but because they didn't know what to say. Gratitude felt strange when it was toward men the town used to whisper about the diner down the road. Conversations always found their way back to that wedding. You hear what happened? someone would say. That rich guy wasn't who we thought he was. They say the biker saved her life. My cousin filmed it. Can't stop watching it. Gives me chills every time. For once, the rumors weren't cruel. They were curious, respectful, even grateful. But not everyone liked it. On the fourth morning after the wedding, Stitch sat outside the station, tightening a loose chain on his Harley, when a black SUV pulled up slow. The tinted window rolled down, and inside sat a man in a crisp gray suit, different from the groom, but carrying the same slick confidence that money gives. "You Stitch?" the man asked. Stitch didn't look up. "Depends who's asking." "Name's Dalton. I'm a lawyer representing Mr. Fields, the gentleman you and your group publicly humiliated." Stitch wiped his hands on a rag. "You mean the one who grabbed a kid at his own wedding?" Dalton's jaw tightened. "You trespassed, intimidated guests, and interfered in a private ceremony. My client intends to press charges." The bikers nearby started to rise, but Stitch lifted a hand. "Sit down," he said quietly. Then he stepped forward until his reflection filled the lawyer's shiny sunglasses. "Tell your client he can try whatever he wants. But before he files that paperwork, he should know the town's got about 20 videos of what really happened. You want to drag that into court? Be my guest." Dalton's lips pressed into a thin smile. "You think the law will side with you?" Stitch's voice stayed calm. "I think the truth already did." The man's smile faded. He rolled up the window, the SUV gliding away with quiet fury. Rook let out a low whistle. "You think he'll really sue?" "Probably," Stitch said, picking up his wrench again. "Men like him can't stand losing control." But even as he spoke, his phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. "You shouldn't have gotten involved." Stitch stared at it for a long moment before setting the phone down. He didn't tell the others. Not yet. That night, the clubhouse was quieter than usual. No laughter, no music, just the soft hum of the neon sign outside. Deacon flipped through channels on the old TV, stopping when a news report flashed on screen. It was about them. Local biker club intervenes in alleged domestic violence. Community split. The reporter stood in front of the same church, microphone in hand. Behind her, someone had left flowers and a note pinned to the fence. Deacon turned the volume up. "While many praise the group's actions as heroic," the reporter said, "others question whether taking the law into their own hands sets a dangerous example." Rook groaned. "Here we go." "They can't help it," Gadget muttered. "They need drama. Peace doesn't sell." Stitch leaned against the bar, arms crossed, watching in silence. The camera cut to an interview. The town sheriff standing beside his cruiser. "I can't condone citizens acting as law enforcement," the sheriff said. "But I will say this. Sometimes right and wrong aren't black and white. Those men may have done more good than harm that day." The screen faded to footage of Leo and his mom walking on the beach. The woman looked peaceful, sun on her face, her son laughing beside her, and for the first time that night, Stitch smiled. Deacon switched the TV off. "Guess not all news is bad." Stitch nodded slowly. "No, some of it's real." But deep down, he couldn't shake that message. You shouldn't have gotten involved. Later, when everyone else had turned in, Stitch stayed outside, staring at the stars. The highway stretched ahead, black and endless. Somewhere out there, a man with too much pride and too little conscience was probably plotting revenge. He didn't care about himself, but he cared about Leo and his mom. They'd been through enough. Rook came out lighting a cigarette. "You think that message was from him?" Stitch didn't answer right away. "Doesn't matter." If it was, we'll handle it. You always say that like it's easy, Rook muttered. Stitch's tone softened. It's not easy. It's just necessary. The night was long and heavy. The wind carried the faint hum of distant traffic. By morning, the crew was already on edge. 2 strangers had been spotted near the gas station before dawn, one taking pictures, another parked down the street too long. Gadget followed them for a few blocks, but they disappeared before he could get a license plate. Feels like someone's watching us, he said. They are, Stitch replied calmly. But that's okay. We'll keep watching back. Despite the tension, they carried on. The world had seen them do something right for once, and that made some people angry, but it also made others brave. 2 days later, a woman in her 30s showed up at the station holding a folded piece of paper. Her hands shook as she spoke. I saw what you did for that little boy. My sister's in trouble. Her boyfriend hits her. The cops won't do anything. Stitch looked at her, listening carefully. Where's she now? In a trailer out near the woods, the woman said. She won't leave. Says he'll find her. Stitch nodded slowly. What's your name? Clara. All right, Clara, he said. You did the right thing coming here. We'll make sure she's safe. Rook frowned. Boss, we just got out of one mess. Stitch cut him off gently. Then we'll do it smarter this time. The woman's eyes filled with tears. You don't even know her. Stitch's reply was quiet but firm. Don't have to. She's someone's sister, someone's daughter. That's enough. Deacon sighed, grabbing his jacket. Guess we're not done showing up yet. They followed Clara out to the edge of town that afternoon. A lonely stretch of dirt road, pine trees swaying in the wind. The trailer sat crooked on its wheels, one window cracked, the paint peeling like dry skin. It looked like a place where hope had packed up and left a long time ago. Clara pointed nervously. He's inside. His truck's out back. Stitch turned to his men. Same deal as before. No violence unless it's the only way out. They approached quietly. Stitch knocked on the door, steady and polite. Sir, we just want to talk. There was silence inside. Then a voice, rough, angry, shouted, Get off my property! Rook muttered, always the same song. Stitch stayed calm. We don't want trouble. We just came to help her pack. The door opened a crack. A man stepped out, shirtless, wild-eyed, reeking of beer. He sneered. You the biker from the news? Stitch met his gaze. Yeah, and you're the reason we're still needed. For a second, nobody breathed. Then the man's expression changed. Not to fear, but recognition. You think you can scare me? Stitch didn't move. No, I think she deserves to walk away without getting hit again. That's all. The man's jaw clenched. But something in Stitch's tone, steady, unflinching, made him back up. He spat on the ground and muttered, Take her then. I don't care. Inside, Clara's sister was crying softly, stuffing a small bag with clothes. When she stepped out, she didn't look at her boyfriend. She just whispered, Thank you, and walked past him toward the truck. As they drove her back to town, she said the same words Leo's mother had. Nobody ever shows up. Stitch looked at her through the mirror. Maybe they will now. The woman smiled weakly, and for the first time in a long while, hope rode with them down that road. But hope, Stitch knew, was a fragile thing. It had to be protected, especially in a town that wasn't used to seeing bikers act like guardians instead of outlaws. The next morning, headlines spread across the state. The photo on the front page showed a woman stepping out of a trailer, tear-streaked but free, with Stitch standing beside her. The caption read, "The Angels Strike Again. Second rescue in 1 week." It sounded almost like fiction, the kind of story that makes people click and shake their heads. But for those who lived it, it was real, raw, messy, and necessary. At the gas station, the crew sat in a loose circle, newspapers scattered on the table. Rook grinned. "Guess we're a movement now." Gadget laughed. "Ain't that something?" All it took was a scared kid and a broken wedding. Deacon folded the paper neatly, his voice quieter, and 2 women who finally got to breathe again. Stitch leaned back in his chair, coffee steaming in his hands. It's not about headlines. It's about showing people what real men do when no one's watching. Outside, a few townfolk drove by slowly, waving or honking in respect. It was small, but it meant everything. But peace never lasts long. That afternoon, Stitch's phone buzzed again. Same unknown number, same tone. "You should have stayed out of it." Only this time, the message came with a photo. His clubhouse, the door, a single bullet hole in the wall beside the window. He felt the anger rise, but he stayed calm. He showed it to Rook without saying a word. Rook's eyes darkened. "That rich coward still trying to scare us?" "Let him try," Stitch said evenly. "Fear only works when you stop showing up." Still, he called the sheriff. 10 minutes later, the cruiser pulled into the lot. The same officer who'd taken the groom away stepped out, looking uncomfortable. "You boys made some powerful enemies," the sheriff said. "Fields has friends in high places, judges, businessmen. They're calling this vigilantism." Stitch folded his arms. "You got any idea how many people thanked us this week?" The sheriff nodded. "I know, but this is the kind of thing that puts a target on your back." Stitch shrugged. "Been living with targets our whole lives." The sheriff exhaled. "I can't tell you what to do, but I will tell you this. What you're doing, it matters. People are talking. Maybe that scares the wrong people, but it's waking up the right ones." He left after that, tires crunching on gravel. The men watched his tail lights disappear into the heat haze. "Waking up the right ones," Deacon murmured. "That's new." "Yeah," Rook said with a small grin. "Feels good, don't it?" Later that evening, a familiar sound rolled into the lot. A small car engine rattling. Leo and his mom stepped out, smiling shyly. She carried a pie wrapped in a towel. "I heard about what happened," she said softly. "Figured you could use something homemade." Stitch smiled faintly. "You didn't have to do that." "I know," she said. "That's why I wanted to." They all laughed, the tension breaking just a little. Leo ran to Stitch, handing him a folded piece of paper. "I drew something for you." Stitch unfolded it. Crayon lines, messy but full of heart, a big red motorcycle with wings, and a little boy standing next to it, smiling. Above it, Leo had written, "Thank you for not being scared." Stitch stared at it for a long time before folding it carefully and tucking it into his vest. "You're something else, kid." The boy grinned. "Mom says we're going to start a new life." Stitch nodded. "That's exactly what you should do." They stayed for coffee and pie. Laughter mixing with the sound of engines cooling. The world outside the gas station might have still been suspicious, but in that little corner of the map, it felt like community again. Something real. Something honest. But then, just as twilight settled, headlights swept across the lot. Another car slowed to a stop. The man tensed automatically. A woman stepped out, the groom's ex-wife, the one who had stood up in the church that day. Her voice trembled. "I wasn't sure if I should come, but thank you for making people believe me too." Stitch recognized the weight in her eyes, the exhaustion that doesn't come from lack of sleep, but from years of not being heard. She handed him a small envelope. "He's gone, moved out of state, probably trying to start over somewhere else." Stitch nodded, then let him run. "We're not chasing ghosts." She hesitated. "You should know he had a file on you. On all of you. He was looking for a way to shut you down." Rook growled low. "Figures." The woman looked at them with tears in her eyes. "Please be careful. Men like him don't forgive. They rebuild their power somewhere else." Stitch gave her a nod of respect. "Thanks for the warning." When she left, the men sat in silence again, the night humming around them. Gadget finally spoke. "You think we're really ready for what comes next?" Stitch took a long breath. "We don't plan for next. We just do right when right shows up." Deacon smirked. "That sounds like Trouble's middle name." Rook chuckled. "Ours too." They laughed, but underneath it was something deeper, a quiet resolve. They'd crossed a line they couldn't uncross, but maybe that was the point. Sometimes doing the right thing doesn't end the story. It starts a new one. That night, after everyone went home, Stitch rode out alone. The desert stretched on both sides of the road, dark and endless. The stars shimmered like silver scars. He thought about all of it. The boy, the mother, the ex-wife, the woman from the trailer, the people who'd whispered, "Thank you," when they thought no one was listening. He thought about how many more there were out there, scared, silent, waiting for someone to believe them. He pulled over, cut the engine, and sat in the stillness. The sound of the night wrapped around him. Crickets, wind, the faint hum of a faraway highway. He reached into his vest and pulled out Leo's drawing. The moonlight washed over the paper, making the colors glow faintly. A big red motorcycle with wings. It was simple, but in that moment it felt like the truest thing he'd ever seen. He smiled to himself and whispered, "Guess the kid was right." He kicked the engine back to life, the roar breaking the silence again. And as he rode toward the horizon, that drawing tucked safely against his chest, the night seemed a little less dark, like somewhere hope was still awake, still waiting to be found. Because sometimes the angels don't fall from heaven. They ride in on two wheels. And after that week, the town of Harmony Creek would never look at the sound of engines the same way again. The next morning, sunlight spilled over the rooftops, painting the old gas station in gold. A few of the bikers were already outside cleaning chrome, sipping coffee, and pretending not to notice that for the first time in years, people were stopping to say hello instead of crossing the street. A delivery truck honked and waved. A woman from the bakery dropped off a box of donuts. Even the sheriff stopped by for a cup of coffee, shaking his head with a half smile. "Didn't think I'd see the day people were bringing you pastries instead of complaints." Rook grinned. "We're full of surprises, Sheriff." The sheriff nodded, his eyes on Stitch. "Word spreading. You know, folks are saying what you did out there changed things. Got people talking." Stitch took a slow sip from his mug. "Talking's good. Listening's better." The sheriff chuckled softly. "You know, not everyone's happy. Some of the rich ones up in Crestview are furious. Said you made them look bad. Maybe they're scared folks will start asking questions about their own secrets." Stitch set his mug down. Let them be scared. Maybe it's time they felt what everyone else has been feeling. The sheriff leaned closer. "Just be careful, Stitch. You've got eyes on you. The kind of eyes that don't forgive embarrassment." Appreciate the warning, Stitch said, tipping his head. When the sheriff drove away, the men went quiet again. The laughter faded, replaced by that familiar hum of unease. The feeling you get when you know peace won't last long. Deacon broke the silence first. He's right. You know the kind of men who hide behind power. They don't forget. Stitch nodded. Then we'll stay ready. Rook looked at him. Ready for what? For whatever tries to take the light back, Stitch said simply. That afternoon, they got visitors again. Not cameras, not reporters, just people. A young woman stopped by with her baby, tears in her eyes. I saw your video, she said. It gave me the courage to leave. I packed up last night. Stitch didn't say much. He just nodded, shook her hand, and wished her safe travels. Later, an old man came by with a limp, saying he'd been a cop years ago. You boys did what most of us wanted to, but couldn't, he said. Don't let anyone tell you different. Stitch smiled faintly. We didn't do it to prove anything. We just showed up. By sunset, the lot was full. People bringing food, stories, even hugs. It was strange watching the same town that once avoided them now treat them like protectors. But Stitch knew something most of them didn't. Redemption always comes with a price. When night fell, the gas station lights flickered, and the hum of the soda machine was the only sound left. Stitch sat on the porch alone, staring out at the empty road. He didn't notice the dark sedan parked 2 blocks away, its headlights off. Inside it, a man sat watching through binoculars. The same slick suit, the same cold smile. Mr. Fields wasn't gone after all. He took a drag of his cigarette and muttered, You think you ruined me? I'm just getting started. The next morning, Stitch found a single white envelope tucked under the station door. No name. Just 2 words written in neat black ink. Keep riding. Inside was a photo, the same one from the church printed from the internet. On the back in red marker, someone had drawn a target over his face. Rook cursed when he saw it. That's it, boss. We can't ignore this. We're not running, Stitch said, voice calm but sharp. But we're not starting a war either. Gadget frowned. Feels like one's already started. Stitch folded the photo and tucked it into his jacket. If they want to test what we stand for, we'll show them the same way we always do by standing our ground. That night, they doubled the watch. Engines stayed warm. Lights stayed on. No one slept much, but nothing happened. Just silence, heavy and waiting. And somewhere around midnight, a sound broke through it. A child's laughter. Stitch turned his head toward the sound. Down the road, he could see Leo sitting in the passenger seat of his mom's car. They were driving by, windows down, music low, just passing through. The boy spotted him and waved, grinning from ear to ear. For the first time in days, Stitch felt something loosen inside his chest. Rook walked up beside him. You see that? Stitch nodded slowly. Yeah, that's what we're fighting for. That sound. Rook grinned. Kid's probably going to tell that story for the rest of his life. Stitch smiled faintly. Good. Let him. The next day, Stitch took the crew out for a long ride along the coast. They didn't talk much, just rode. The wind carried the salt air, the ocean glinting blue and gold beside them. Somewhere along the cliffs, they stopped. The bikes lined up, the waves crashing below. Stitch stood at the edge, the sea breeze tugging at his jacket. Deacon stepped up beside him. You ever think about how weird this is? Bikers being the good guys? Stitch smirked. Maybe we always were. Just took the world a while to see it. Rook let out a low laugh. You sound like one of them philosophers now. Stitch shrugged. Nah, just a man who's seen enough bad to recognize good when it shows up. The group fell silent again, watching the horizon. The sun dipped low, painting everything orange and gold. For a while, it felt like peace. Real peace. Then Stitch's phone buzzed again. Another message, this one different. You can't save everyone. He didn't show it to the others this time. He just stared at it for a moment, then deleted it. Deacon noticed the shadow cross his face. What's wrong? Stitch looked back toward the ocean. Nothing. Just remembering that every time you save one person, someone else out there still waiting. Deacon nodded slowly. Yeah, but if you don't start somewhere, you never save anyone. Stitch smiled faintly. Guess we started something. Then they rode back into town as the last light faded, the sound of the engines blending with the wind. By the time they parked, the town was asleep. But above the gas station, the porch light stayed on, a small glow against the dark, like a signal for anyone out there who still needed hope. And though Stitch would never admit it out loud, he knew what that light meant now. It wasn't just for the lost. It was for the people brave enough to look for them. The porch light stayed on that night, a beacon in the quiet town, steady and soft. Some said they could see it from the highway, a faint golden glow that never went out. People started calling it the Angel's Light. No one really knew what it meant, but everyone knew how it made them feel. Safe. A few weeks passed. Summer began to fade, and the smell of rain carried through the mornings. Life, as it always does, went back to its usual rhythm. But something in the town had shifted. The same diner that used to turn bikers away now kept a fresh pot of coffee for them. The old couple from the hardware store smiled when they passed. And every time someone heard the rumble of engines in the distance, they didn't flinch anymore. They looked up. They hoped. At the gas station, Stitch sat on the porch with a newspaper folded on his knee. The front page showed a photo of a fundraiser. The words "Ride for the Voiceless" printed across the top. Dozens of bikers from other towns had joined the cause. Rook came out holding 2 mugs of coffee. "Looks like you started something big," he said, handing one over. Stitch took it, eyes still on the picture. "We didn't start it. We just reminded people they could care again." Deacon chuckled from inside. "Try telling that to the reporter who called you a hero." "This morning." Stitch shook his head. "Heroes wear capes. We wear oil and road dust." The men laughed, but they all knew the truth. Stitch didn't want praise. He wanted change. That afternoon, they got a visit from the last person they expected. The sheriff pulled up, stepping out of his cruiser with a small box in his hands. "Thought you boys might want this," he said. Stitch raised a brow. "What is it?" The sheriff set it on the table. Inside was a plaque, hand-carved, rough, but beautiful. It read, "For standing up when no one else would." Below it were small engraved letters from the people of Harmony Creek. Rook blinked. They made us an award. The sheriff smiled faintly. "Yeah, guess even tough towns can say thank you." Stitch stared at it for a long time before saying quietly, "Didn't think we'd ever be on the same side of a ceremony." The sheriff chuckled. "You earned it, Stitch, whether you like it or not." When he left, the men stood around the plaque, not sure what to do with it. Gadget finally said, "We should hang it up inside." Deacon nodded. "Nah, leave it right here. Let the world see it when they drive by. Stitch smiled. Good idea. So they nailed it to the front wall of the gas station right beside the flag. Every person who passed could see it. A symbol carved not in marble or gold, but in sweat and second chances. Later that evening, the sky began to turn red and gold. The air smelled like rain again, and the world felt slower, softer somehow. Stitch leaned against his bike, staring at the horizon. Rook walked up beside him. You think we'll ever ride somewhere that quiet? Stitch smiled faintly. Probably not. Trouble's got a way of following us. Rook laughed. Then I hope it never runs out of gas. They shared a laugh, but Stitch's eyes stayed on the sunset. That same road that had brought them chaos, purpose, and redemption all in one. As the colors deepened, headlights appeared in the distance. A small car slowed as it neared the station. It was Leo and his mom again. They parked, stepping out with smiles that said more than words ever could. Leo had grown a little taller, sunburned from the beach. His mom looked peaceful now. No makeup hiding bruises, no fear behind her eyes. Stitch greeted them with a grin. Well, look who finally traded sand for asphalt. Leo laughed. Mom said I could visit before school starts. She's right on time, Rook said, handing him a root beer. The boy took a sip, looking around at the familiar place. You guys still help people? Stitch nodded. Every day we can. Leo thought for a moment. Mom says you changed her life. Stitch smiled softly. Nah, she changed it herself. We just made sure she got the chance. The boy's expression grew serious. When I get older, I want to do that too. Stitch raised an eyebrow. You want to be a biker? Leo grinned. No, but I want to be someone who shows up. That made Stitch laugh. The kind of laugh that comes from somewhere deep, somewhere proud. That's all this world really needs, kid. Leo's mom looked at Stitch. He talks about you all the time, about that day. I think it made him believe people can still be good. Stitch's voice softened. That's the best thing anyone could have said. The boy took something from his backpack, a small wooden keychain shaped like a motorcycle. It looked handmade, rough around the edges. He handed it to Stitch. For you, so you don't forget me. Stitch took it carefully, running a thumb over the carved letters. Ride for the brave. He cleared his throat. You got it backward, kid. You're the brave one. The sun dipped lower, and the sky burned orange. Leo and his mom got back in their car, waving as they pulled away. Rook watched them go. Feels different, don't it? Like we actually did something that stuck. Stitch nodded slowly. Yeah, guess the noise we made turned into something that'll outlast us. The men stood there in the fading light, the engines silent, the world peaceful. When darkness came, the porch light clicked on again, steady as ever. A trucker passing through slowed his rig just enough to read the plaque on the wall. He smiled, gave a soft honk, and drove on. Inside the clubhouse, the men shared a quiet toast. Not to glory, not to power, but to something far greater. Deacon raised his glass to showing up. Rook clinked his mug to second chances. Stitch held his up last. To the ones who still believe, they drank. And for a moment, the world felt whole. The kind of whole you only get when courage and kindness meet in the same place. Outside the highway stretched endlessly under the stars. Somewhere far away, another engine rumbled, carrying its own story, its own mission, its own heart. And though they didn't know it, That one act, a boy stopping a wedding, had sparked something far bigger than they'd ever imagined. Because every time someone heard that story, they looked at bikers differently. And every time someone heard that boy's voice say, "Please don't let her marry him," they remembered one thing. Sometimes the world changes because somebody was brave enough to ask for help. Weeks turned into months, and Harmony Creek slowly went back to being just another quiet town tucked between the hills and the highway. But for the people who'd lived through it, the boy, the mother, the bikers, it never truly went back to normal. Some truths don't fade. They settle in like roots. The wedding that never happened became a story people whispered to newcomers, a kind of local legend. They'd point at the little white church and say, "That's where the angels showed up." And at the gas station, the plaque still hung on the wall, the gold letters catching sunlight every morning. Below it, the porch light still burned, steady as ever. Nobody turned it off. Not once. Stitch sat beneath it most evenings now, boots up on the railing, coffee cooling beside him. Sometimes he'd hear kids riding their bikes past, pretending to be part of the gang, making engine sounds with their mouths. Sometimes strangers stopped just to shake his hand. But most days it was just quiet, the good kind of quiet. Rook came out carrying 2 sandwiches wrapped in paper. "You ever get tired of being famous?" he teased, tossing one to Stitch. Stitch smiled faintly. "I wasn't famous when people thought I was trouble. Not going to start now that they think I'm a saint." Rook laughed. "Guess both labels missed the mark." Stitch shrugged. "Labels always do?" They ate in silence for a while, watching the sun drop low behind the trees. The highway hummed in the distance, steady, endless. Deacon joined them a few minutes later, holding an envelope. "Mail came for you," he said. Stitch raised an eyebrow. "For me? From who?" Deacon handed it over. The handwriting was small. Careful. The return address said Pacific View Elementary School. Stitch opened it slowly. Inside was a drawing, a classroom wall filled with pictures of motorcycles and little paper angels cut from colored construction paper. In the middle was a note written in crayon. "Thank you for saving my mom. My teacher said heroes don't always wear uniforms. I told her sometimes they wear leather jackets. It was signed." Leo Stitch didn't say a word. He just stared at it, his thumb brushing over the uneven letters. Rook leaned over his shoulder. "Guess the kid's still watching." Stitch smiled softly. "Good. Means he's growing up, right?" Deacon set his coffee down. "You think he remembers everything that happened?" Stitch nodded slowly. "Yeah, but maybe that's okay. Sometimes remembering is what keeps you brave." The sky deepened into purple. Fireflies blinked in the grass. The porch light flickered on again, catching the edge of the plaque just right so it gleamed like gold. After a long silence, Rook spoke quietly. "You ever think about what it means, boss? That kid showing up that day, us being there by chance, it all lined up too perfect." Stitch chuckled. "You starting to sound superstitious?" Rook grinned. "Maybe, but still feels like we were meant to be there." Stitch didn't answer right away. He looked out at the empty road where it had all started. The same road where a small boy had stopped, 70 engines with nothing but courage and a cry for help. "Maybe we were," he said finally. "Or maybe life just gives you one chance to do something that matters. And the rest of it's up to what you do with that chance." Deacon raised his mug. "Then here's to chances." They clinked cups together. The sound small but steady, like a promise. For a while, none of them spoke, The world around them seemed perfectly still, just the wind through the trees, the low hum of the highway, and the smell of oil and summer rain. Stitch leaned back in his chair, eyes half closed. "Funny thing," he said. "We thought we were saving them, but maybe they saved us too." Rook smiled. "How you figure that?" Stitch looked at him, eyes soft. "Because they reminded us what we're for. Not the patches, not the bikes, the people." Deacon nodded. "Yeah. Been a long time since we rode for something that felt clean." They sat in that truth for a while, old men in worn leather, bathed in orange light, feeling for once like the noise of their lives had led somewhere good. Later that night, the others drifted off one by one, leaving Stitch alone with the hum of crickets and the glow of the porch light. He reached into his vest pocket and pulled out the small wooden keychain Leo had carved. "Ride for the brave." He turned it over in his hand, the edges smooth from time. Then he hooked it to his keys. It felt right. The moon rose high, silver and calm. Down the highway, a pair of headlights appeared. Another biker passing through, his tail light glowing red against the darkness. Stitch watched him fade into the distance, the sound of the engine blending with the wind until it was just a memory. He smiled faintly and whispered to no one, "Keep riding, brother." The world felt peaceful, honest, alive. Because even after all the noise, all the chaos, all the broken things they'd tried to fix, something remained. Something that didn't belong to them alone anymore. It was bigger than the club, bigger than the town. It was the simple truth that had carried them through every storm. You don't need wings to be an angel. Sometimes you just need the courage to stop, to listen, to care. And as the night deepened and the porch light burned steady against the dark, that truth lingered in the air like a prayer no one had to say out loud. Engines might fade, roads might end, but the ones who show up when it matters, they never really disappear. Because the world doesn't forget the day the angels rode for a boy and taught everyone watching what it truly means to be free.